She was a mother, she was a slaughterhouse worker, and Australia's first woman to be sentenced to life without parole. Katherine Knight didn't just kill. She staged her crime like a ritual, and what she left behind was beyond comprehension. Her partners feared her. Her children lived in the shadow of her rage, and in the end, not even death was enough. You're watching Into the Unknown, Unsolved Mysteries and True Crime. Katherine Knight was born in 1955, one of twin girls, into a world where violence wasn't hidden, it was expected. Her mother, Barbara, left her husband in disgrace after a scandalous affair with a man named Ken Knight, a brutal slaughterhouse worker with a drinking problem and a temper to match. The new couple moved to the rural town of Aberdeen, but the chaos didn't end. It festered. Katherine would later claim that her father was an alcoholic who beat her mother and that she was assaulted by several family members until the age of 11. Whether it was inherited or absorbed, rage took root in Katherine early. She was unpredictable, silent and still one moment, violent and explosive the next. Her teachers feared her, and so did the kids in her school. She dropped out of school at 15, barely literate, and took a job at a clothing factory. But that wasn't enough. A year later, she found her real calling, at the slaughterhouse. There, she was given her own set of knives. She kept them hung over her bed at home, just in case, she said. In 1974, Katherine married David Kellett, a fellow slaughterhouse worker and an alcoholic. In more ways than one, he reminded her of her father. But David had no idea that the woman walking down the aisle was already sharpening her knives. On their wedding night, after having sex 3 times, David passed out. Katherine flew into a rage, not because he hurt her, but because he stopped. She wanted more, and when she didn't get it, she tried to strangle him in his sleep. Katherine's violent tendencies didn't stop after the wedding night. One evening, when David returned home late from a darts competition, she was waiting. Enraged by his tardiness, she burned all his clothes and shoes. Then, without warning, she struck him on the back of the head with a frying pan, fracturing his skull. David managed to escape to a neighbor's house, collapsing from his injuries. He was treated for a severe head wound. Despite the assault, Katherine convinced him to drop the charges, and the cycle of abuse continued. Eventually, David couldn't endure the violence any longer and left for good. Katherine was now alone, with 2 daughters, a set of knives hanging above her bed, and a reputation for destruction that was only beginning to grow. Katherine's next relationship was with a minor named David Saunders. He moved in with her and her daughters early on, but it didn't take long for the violence to follow. She grew possessive, paranoid. If he spent time with his friends, she destroyed his clothes. One day, in a fit of rage, she slit the throat of his puppy right in front of him, just to prove she could. But like the others before him, David stayed, long enough for Katherine to give birth to another daughter, and for the fear inside the house to grow even deeper. In 1990, Katherine Knight entered a relationship with John Chillingworth, a former co-worker from the slaughterhouse. They had a son together the following year, her 4th child. For a time, things seemed quiet. Compared to the past, this relationship was almost normal. There are no known reports that Katherine ever harmed Chillingworth, but the pattern was already written. Calm was never her resting state, it was a warning sign. After 3 years, she left him for another man. John Price, and this time, the ending wouldn't just be violent, it would become one of the most horrifying crimes in Australian history. John Price was well liked in the town of Aberdeen. A dependable, blue-collar father of 3, he worked long hours at the local mines and rarely missed a shift. He wasn't flashy, just steady, honest, and trying to hold things together after a painful divorce. That's when he met Katherine Knight. They were introduced at a pub through mutual friends. Katherine was bold, flirtatious, the kind of woman who took up space when she entered a room. At first, that confidence seemed charming. She moved into his home quickly. At first, things were passionate, intense. She cooked his favorite meals, smothered him with affection. It felt like love. But slowly, the darkness crept in. Her jealousy turned explosive, her moods volatile. When John Price made it clear he had no interest in marrying her, Katherine retaliated by filming items he had allegedly stolen from work and then sending that footage to his employer. Because of this, Price was fired from the job he'd held for 17 years. They broke up, but like so many before him, he eventually let her back in. Not into his heart, but into his life. Maybe for the kids, maybe out of habit, maybe because he didn't believe it could ever go as far as she threatened. She stabbed him once in the chest during an argument. She told him over and over that one day she'd kill him. By February 2000, he'd had enough. After another violent outburst, John filed for a restraining order and told friends it was the only way he might survive. The next day at work, he said something no one forgot. "If I don't show up tomorrow, it's because she killed me." In the early hours of March 1st, 2000, Katherine Knight reached for one of the butcher knives she kept beside her bed. The same knives she used back in the slaughterhouse days. As John Price slept, she attacked. Not once, but 37 times. Forensic evidence shows he woke during the assault. He tried to flee. Blood was found on the walls, the light switches, and the front door. But he collapsed in the hallway and died from his wounds. But the horror didn't end there. Katherine picked him up from his legs, dragged his body downstairs, and what she did next was cold, methodical, and inhuman. Katherine grabbed her fillet knife, sharpened it, and then she skinned him with surgical precision, then hung his remains from a meat hook in the living room, just like the animals she used to process at the slaughterhouse. What she did next was almost beyond belief. Katherine decapitated John Price. Then, using parts of his body, she prepared a meal, cooking them alongside potatoes, pumpkin, beets, zucchini, cabbage, squash, and gravy. It wasn't just cannibalism, it was a performance. On the dining table, police found 2 full plates, each carefully set, each labeled with a name. They were the name of John Price's children. In the kitchen, his head was boiling in a pot on the stove. And outside, in the yard, officers discovered a 3rd plate. It had been partially eaten and then thrown away. It appeared Katherine had tried to consume the meal herself, but couldn't finish it. Veteran investigators called it one of the most disturbing crime scenes they had ever seen. Not just because of the violence, but because of the message. What Katherine Knight did wasn't just brutal. It was ritualistic, intentional, meant to wound far beyond the body. This wasn't about revenge, it was about legacy. A final act designed to haunt those left behind. When police found her, she was unconscious in the house, having taken a large dose of pills in what appeared to be a suicide attempt. But she survived and was arrested for murder. Katherine Knight was charged with the murder of John Price. At first, she pled not guilty, claiming she had no memory of the crime. But the evidence was overwhelming, and before the trial even began, she changed her plea to guilty. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Katherine Knight became the first woman in Australian history to receive that sentence. She remains behind bars to this day at Silverwater Women's Correctional Center, and her name, much like her crime, has never been forgotten. Katherine Knight had 4 children from her various relationships. Their stories are rarely spoken about, and perhaps that's for the best. Some were placed in protective custody, others witnessed her violence up close. They are the forgotten victims, overshadowed by the horror that made headlines. And while Katherine Knight remains locked away in solitary confinement, the echo of her rage still haunts the lives she left behind. You've been watching Into the Unknown, Unsolved Mysteries and True Crime. If this story chilled you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more true crime that digs beneath the surface. And let us know in the comments, do you think some people are born evil or made that way? Until next time, stay safe.